So now let me introduce Bob Kelleher. Bob is the founder and the CEO of the Employee Engagement Group. And he's the author of Employee Engagement for Dummies, the book Creativeship, and the top-selling employee engagement book, Louder Than Words, 10 practical employee engagement steps that drive results. Bob spent over 25 years in the AEC industry, and he has become a recognized thought leader, speaker, and consultant on the subjects of employee engagement, workforce trends, and leadership. Before he opened up his own consulting business, Bob was the Chief Human Capital Officer for a Fortune 500 global professional services firm with nearly 50,000 employees and 450 offices around the globe. Okay, folks, give me some help here. Let's give Bob Kelleher a warm welcome.
Thanks, my man. Right. Wow, I've got the last slot. Aren't I lucky? You know, one of the attendees is a client, and he came up to me about a half hour ago, and he said, "Hey, don't take this the wrong way, but I'm going to Alcatraz." I said, "What?" Think of it. He has a choice: spending time with me or going to Alcatraz. Took Alcatraz. John, do you have the remote? Did you steal it? Nope, wait. Here we go. We have it. Okay, let's jump right in. We have an action-packed hour for you. So let's, hopefully this little thing will work. Here we go. Creativeship. Leadership is so yesterday. John did a nice job giving a little bit of bio, but I'll kind of shed some light. Who remembers Metcalf Finetti, the old sanitary engineering firm? Was there anybody in San Francisco in 1989 during the earthquake? I asked because the Water and Wastewater Federation was having the annual meeting, and I was here. I was a personnel rep for Metcalf Finetti in 1985. I rode that sanitary engineering career up till Director of Human Resources until an environmental consulting firm called Enser hired me in 1993. We built Enser from an 800-person firm to 3,000. In 2000 to 2005, I call those the wonder years. Those were the years that we started focusing on this concept of if we can somehow engage our employees, will it turn into profitable results? And from 2000 to 2005, it was a pretty remarkable run. In fact, in 2005, I became Chief Operations Officer as well as Head of Human Resources, which I think speaks volumes about the impact that people can have in an organization if the HR person becomes Chief Operations Officer. 2005, a very small engineering firm came into our lives called AECOM. AECOM acquired us. Those were the good years, 2005, 2007. AECOM was a holding company, and they had 28 global operating companies. And back then, what they did, at least with me, they asked if I would work with 28 global operating companies and put the same blueprint of engagement across the globe. And they really gave birth to a consultant because I found I really enjoyed that. AECOM became a publicly traded company in the latter part of 2007. They elevated me up to the Chief HR Officer at AECOM, and that was 2008. 2009, at the height of the recession, I flew to Los Angeles, walked into my boss's office, and I said, I quit. I wasn't engaged. They were asking me to try to engage 50,000 employees, but I wasn't engaged. So I thought we'd be entering a little small economic hiccup. And unbeknownst to me, it was the Great Recession. Wrote first book, Louder Than Words. That led to Creativeship, the theme of today's talk. And this is interesting, employee engagement for dummies. You know, employee engagement for dummies? All the Dummies books are the #1 book series of its kind across the globe. So when they first came to me, I said, I can't write a Dummies book. And they said, well, we have you as the #1 thought leader on this topic across the globe, and if you don't write it, someone else will. So wrote Employee Engagement for Dummies. 346 pages of best practices, now published in, I believe, 20 languages. Pretty remarkable. And there's a book coming out after the first of the year, which I will touch on, called I Engage. It's a very personal, reflective book. So stay tuned. That's kind of what I've done, but in so many ways, what I've done is irrelevant. Who I am is relevant. So who am I? Well, I grew up in public housing. Anyone in the room grew up in public housing? Free book if you did. No. I'll find another way to give out a free book. Actually, that's my home, but it's not my entire home. We only had half. The Pippies lived next door. Only had one girlfriend in my entire life. We met when we were 14. 2 times breast cancer survivor. She's my hero. Between the two of us, we raised 3 laboratory specimens known as the millennials. I see how they talk, I see what engages them, I see how they work, I see how they communicate, and guess what? We have a fascinating window that we're going to be entering, trying to lead and engage this population. Always wanted a man's dog, ended up with Gizmo. 37 Kellehers every year, Martha's Vineyard, first 2 weeks of August, you will find us. Why do I share that? Well, 15 years ago, if I disliked working for your firm, I could tell them. In fact, my reach was probably 200. Today, if I dislike you, my reach is in the millions. And where does it start? It starts with a workforce that is engaged, a customer base, a client base who's also engaged. And we will be coming back to each one of these themes. Who agrees the greatest rock and roll band of all times, the Beatles? You didn't raise your hand. New kids on the block. Okay, let me talk a little bit about Creativeship. Creativeship is a fascinating concept, and I do have a couple of books that I'll be giving away. Let me take a step back. The whole concept of Creativeship came to me in 2000, 2001. If you recall, in 2001, we had another economic hiccup. But we also had the emergence of very large firms losing their moral compass. Why? In fact, Enron was one of our clients. We're still waiting for Enron to pay us $1 million. Well, both literally and figuratively, those brands all became brands no more. 2008, 2009, the collapse of our financial institutions kind of reminded me yet again that there's something wrong with leadership. What is it that otherwise good companies, good leaders, end up making really, really bad decisions? Otherwise good people, good employers, engaged employees, best places to work, make bad moral decisions. Let's continue. Each one of these brands is either a brand no more or file bankruptcy. Why? I can tell you they were all best places to work, great people, market leaders at one point in time. What happened? They don't change with the times. There's not a level of sustainability. I loved hearing Chuck on day one talk about disruption. And having worked for a publicly traded company, and I used to go to all the quarterly earnings meetings, guess what? No one used to ask me about the people. No one used to ask about our strategic plan 5 years down the road. They would ask us about what's happening over the next 3 months. So this whole concept of sustainability of a business, I believe, is lost. So the way I define this concept of creativeship is the creation of great and sustainable business cultures, but business cultures that have 6 interconnecting business pillars. And that's the theme of Creativeship. Pillar number one is you have to have a culture of purpose. You have to have a workforce that's engaged. You have to perform. You have to have a culture of creativity and innovation. You have to brand. David, I was fascinated with your presentation yesterday. This whole concept of branding has never been more powerful than it is today. We'll talk about a concept that I call tri-branding. And globalization, I was with a client recently, it was kind of funny, they were in Virginia, and I was pushing them to think global, and they said, the way we define global is moving it to Texas. I'll share with you why we all need to be thinking about global growth. Now, there are books, and there are speakers, and there are consultants, and there are academics who talk about each one of these pillars. I believe the concept of creativeship is the interdependency each one of these pillars have on the other 5 pillars, which I'll explain. So let's talk a little bit about my 4-quadrant. Creativeship drives creativity, which drives sustainability. Like any management consultant, I need my own 4-quadrant. So if you look on one axis, sustainability, on the other, creativity, the place you don't want to be is the lower left. In any 4-quadrant, you never want to be in the lower left, right? Lower left, old ideas, old problems. You didn't see the market changing. You got caught by surprise. Maybe you have a culture of because. We can't do that because. And that culture of because prevents you from moving forward. Examples. Pan Am. In fact, every major U.S. airline carrier filed for bankruptcy. Why? Oldsmobile. Still breaks my heart that Oldsmobile and Pontiac are gone. Polaroid. Digital. Iconic companies in my own backyard of Boston. That's right, I'm from Boston. It might surprise you. The Twinkie. Was I the only one who was devastated when the Twinkie went bankrupt? Came back barely. Let's take a look at organizations that somehow have been able to sustain themselves in spite of not having creativity. It's kind of remarkable when you think about it. Maybe they were once creative, maybe they were, or maybe even are, dominant as it relates to barriers to entry. So you're not creative, but it's pretty tough for anyone else to enter. Some examples. Sears. Am I the only person who wonders how Sears is still here? Real estate. The government. Now, let me share an example of a government agency that I've worked with over the past 4 years. And about 25% of my work is in the AEC space, but 75% is outside the space. So it's been interesting because I can now blend some of the best practices from outside the industry back in the industry. Well, the Centers for Disease Control, I've done their leadership development over the past 4 or 5 years. And what's really interesting about them, they live the premise of creativeship. In fact, I would put the CDC way up in the upper right. They are purpose-driven, they are engaged, they are global, they are high performance, and they have proven that you can be a government agency and do everything right. And we as taxpayers should be glad they are there after seeing the type of work they do. And IBM's interesting. Do you know that IBM was 6 months away from having no cash? And then they morphed. They morphed from a manufacturer to a professional services firm. Fascinating. They almost didn't make it. Let's talk a little bit about these cool startups. Companies that have maybe low barrier to entry, maybe they're first in. Highly creative. Limited application, unless they evolve. Short-term application. Usually it's born from a breakthrough idea. Examples would be Blockbuster. Whatever happened to Blockbuster? How come they didn't see streaming videos? They had billions of dollars in cash. Why weren't they investing it? They were first in. Enron. Enron was incredibly creative. Anyone ever work for Enron? They were a pretty cool company. They were creative, but they were too creative with their numbers. Didn't last. BlackBerry. They owned us, the business traveler, but they totally underestimated the fact that we as business travelers wanted to be cool as well. Why can't we have apps? They may or may not make it. Netflix. They morph from sending DVDs in the mail to streaming videos pretty quick. Why did they make it, and how come Blockbuster didn't? Now, the upper right is where you want to be. Cultures of creativity, cultures of innovation, cultures of why not, cultures of purpose. Organizations that historically are up there year in, year out. They include brands that you'll know, Procter & Gamble, GE, 3M. How can you be the upper right firm in the AEC space? Now let's jump in. We're going to share a number of case studies, some case studies that are inside this industry, some are outside the industry. And by the way, at some point in time, I will jump out there and be there with you. I'm not a podium guy, so bear with me when I start walking around. We're going to start off with purpose. I love this Thomas Friedman's quote. I believe it's so true. Tomorrow's companies will need to have the brains of a business school graduate and the heart of a social worker. And increasingly with the millennials in particular, and us baby boomers who are moving towards the back nine of our careers, we're asking this question, why? See, I can go on all of your websites. Within seconds, I can tell you or tell anyone exactly what you do. People don't work for you because of what you do. They work for you because of who you are and why you exist. But we really struggle with this why question. And we struggle with the who question. So how are you positioning yourself? Not just we make great buildings and bridges and transportation systems and highway designs and treatment facilities, but who are you? Case study, Whole Foods. Provide choices for nurturing the body, the community, and the planet. Anyone shop at Whole Foods? You're richer than I am. I find Whole Foods to be such a fascinating case study. They are proving, talk about multipliers, they are proving that we will pay more money if we can somehow connect with the brand. Apple's been proving it for a long time as well. That's their mission statement. Now we know what they are, they're a supermarket. Whirlpool, I was in Mexico giving a talk and I was on the same platform as the CEO of Whirlpool. And this is what the theme of their talk was. There's no right way to do a wrong thing. And when I heard that theme, I said to myself, wouldn't it have been great if someone in Enron stood up and said that? Well, I heard this discussion about Whirlpool, global, high performance, number one in every market they compete in. They bought their number one competitor a few years back, Maytag. And I was struck by the corporate social responsibility aspect of Whirlpool. In fact, I went and I hunted down something that I could show you because I was so smitten with Whirlpool. Here you go.
A key, an ordinary house key. But to someone who's never had a home of their own before, a key is precious metal. It opens more than just a door. It opens up a whole new way of life. That's why Habitat for Humanity is so close to my heart. The people at Whirlpool feel the same way. Whirlpool donates a refrigerator and a range to every Habitat home.
It's a good day.
And every year, thousands of Whirlpool employees volunteer their time for Habitat.
Hey, see the rest of the house.
Everyone deserves a decent, affordable home. And together, we can make that happen. One family at a time.
John, put the house lights up. I want to see who's crying right now. I spoke at the National Society of Professional Engineers a couple of years back, and we had time for Q&A, and someone asked me a question. Bob, what's the one idea you have that can help us engage our workforce? I said, okay, this is an idea. Here goes. And they all grabbed a piece of paper, like 500 of them. I said, when you go back to the office, I'd like you to give every single one of your employees 1 week off with pay to do community service. And they all put their pens down. What were they thinking? Billability. I can guarantee you if you did that, it would pay for itself 10 times over. And you'd start establishing who you are as an organization. It's simple, effective, and believe me, it'll be free. Your CFO won't believe you. Oh, by the way, look what Jim Collins says. If you can somehow get your brand, get people to understand what your why is, what your purpose and values, in a way that resonates, you outperform your competition 6 times. It's one of those things that's doing well by doing good. Let's move into engagement. This is my space. By the way, a little side note. The reason I became a disciple of engagement was we took a company that was average in every business metric, would not have been on the centers of excellence. And we did nothing different other than focus on engagement. And in a 5-year window, we became #1 best in class in every single metric that we had. And when we reflected back, it was because we were able to somehow get our employees to give slightly more than they were given prior. Now let's talk a little bit about engagement. Contrary to what we might think, we're not happy. Your employees are not happy. In fact, this is 2015. Gallup claims that 32.5% of your employees are engaged. They claim half are disengaged, and they claim close to 17% are actively disengaged. Actively disengaged are the ones that are sitting there saying, do you believe John thinks we can double our sales? He's nuts. And they share that with the others. Actively disengaged. Now, the statistics haven't really gone up, in spite of the recession improving, in spite of the job market becoming much more healthy. We're still looking at a very high level of disengagement inside the workforce. I created a video a couple of years ago. I'm going to share with you now, a little bit dated. Instead of 32.5% engaged, it was 30% engaged. But I encourage you to use this video and bring it back to your organizations. It's a great document to sit down, show it, and have a discussion with your employees, with your leadership team. It's had close to 600,000 views, so for a business video, it's gone viral. But let me share it with you. It's called Who's Sinking Your Boat? Give me 4 minutes. The reason you have to ask people who didn't create the current state what they think, because the people that create the current state are protective of the current state. When I produced this little video, I brought in a Boston University film student, Anton Thelner. Anton comes in my office one day and he shows me that picture with the blood coming out of the letters. I said, Anton, I can't have blood. This is a business video. And he looked at me and he said, Mr. K, you gotta be edgy. If it was left up to me, other videos that I have on YouTube, max 25, 26,000, still good, 600,000. He's now working on a new one coming up that'll be released early 2016. Anyone 44 years old in the room? Sorry. Yeah. Sorry about the creativity thing. I'm sure you're the 2%. Engagement is not about giving money. For those who were in Kate's session on compensation this morning, she closed with a Dan Pink video. I know Dan, his work on Drive is terrific, and he's spot on. Your employees do not get engaged or motivated because of money. They just don't, especially in a knowledge workforce. Let's talk a little bit about engagement. Engagement is the intersection of you trying to help your employees be successful and your employees trying to help you be successful. If you throw money at them, you might be creating a culture of satisfaction, maybe even a culture of entitlement. Be careful of giving stuff. Engagement is a mutual commitment. I'm going to help you, but time out, you have to help us. And this is an area that AEC industries, firms don't do a good job. You hire high-achieving people. You hire the people that were the really smart kids in school, that achieved right through school. Somehow they enter our workplace, and yet we have mediocre profitability. We have people that are underperforming. Why? I believe we do a dismal job connecting the metrics of success with how they can realize the success. This bond, this mutual commitment, just like the word engagement, two sides coming together. That's how I define engagement. Number one driver of engagement is the boss. It's also the number one driver of disengagement. So what we normally do is we take the engineer or a scientist or an architect, people who are highly left-brained, and we give them 6 people to manage. How many of you look to see if someone is empathetic? Is that a competency you're evaluating? Empathy is the number one driver of engagement. Do we even look for it when we ask someone to manage people? Engaging the ideas of others. How are you reaching out, asking your Anton to come up with blood in the video? That's a different idea. I'm going to share this great little case study. Paul Forbeatty's been a client for a few years. Fortune 100 best place to work. Well, they were asking their employees, what don't you like? And managers and employees alike, both sides said, we hate performance appraisals. So they decided, in a very simple way, to have a task team of millennials design the new performance appraisal process. This is how they kicked off the performance appraisal season. It was kicked off during Halloween of 2014. I'll tell you something else they did. They reduced their performance appraisal form from 8 pages to 2 pages. They eliminated this once-a-year torturous process and put in mini touch-up points. Deloitte just did a fascinating case study. They concluded they were spending a couple of million hours a year on performance appraisals and everyone hated them. Deloitte just got rid of their performance appraisals. The millennials want frequent feedback. They don't want once a year. They are employees of breadth, not employees of depth. They don't want 8 pages of a performance appraisal with you sitting across the table. Sorry, you'll bore me. They don't read newspapers, they're not going to read their performance appraisal. This is a software company. This is a really cool company. I'm not sure you guys are ready for this. Anyone who manages people in this organization, they have their face on the company's intranet. And any employee can go rate them as if they were rating a YouTube video. So you have Marissa Jones, she's really good. She gets 5 stars. You got Brendan Williams, 3.5, not bad. And of course there's Cranky Connor. Who wants to work for Cranky Connor? Talk about holding line managers accountable. You may not be ready for this today, but I absolutely believe this is where we're heading. But we have a challenge with conventional engagement wisdom. Disengaged employees continue to cost us $370 billion annually. And as you saw, in spite of people like me trying to help organizations, we're not really seeing much in terms of gains. Why is it? I think it's actually because of this. We tend to view engagement as a one-size-fits-all. We're trying to get people to give above and beyond, and we assume everyone's at a baseline, and you're trying to get everyone to go above the baseline while minimizing those under the baseline who are you disengaged, right? Life should be so simple. The work we're doing on iEngage is based on the following concept. Every single one of your employees will have pockets of engagement and disengagement. So in the reality, that is the life of an employee. I had a fight with my spouse. I took in my father-in-law. We're taking care of him. I've got to rush home from work. My wife battled breast cancer. You think I was giving above and beyond during that window? I wasn't. See, management has never been more difficult because we're no longer just managing the employee. We're now managing the person. Technology has blended who we are managing. And I think organizations need to start managing the entire person, not just the employee. And of course, it's even more difficult because we don't just have one person reporting to us. That's our life. Leadership has never been more of a challenge than it is today. If you can somehow move the needle, that's a competitive advantage. Now, we talked a little bit about empathy. Let me take a step back. According to research, if you want to build enterprise-wide engagement, you have to somehow figure out how to get your employees to trust you. Based on research. Trust in management is the #1 way to build enterprise-wide engagement. Now, what's interesting, when we look at the engagement scores being kind of low, I think what is behind that as well, the recessionary window was tough. We had layoffs. We asked people to do more with less. We beat them up on billability. And now things are better, and we're saying, oh, we love you now. And the employees are saying, well, not yet. Well, trust in management. How do you build trust? You have to be competent. You have to have integrity. Based on the research of Connexa, the #1 way you build trust organizationally is you have to demonstrate you care about the well-being of people. Again, we followed the recession. Did we demonstrate that? There's evidence by Dr. Wayne Kessio from the University of Colorado who actually claims, in fact, one of the attendees here today shared this white paper with me yesterday, so this is fresh, claims that organizations that don't have a layoff, that keep their staff, outperform over time those employees who try to cut their way towards profitability. And I believe it goes back to that. Demonstrate you care about the well-being of people. And minimize disengagement drivers. Let's come back to money for a second. It's been a theme of this conference.
Would you like a pony?
Yeah.
Would you like a pony?
Yeah.
Here you go, this is for you.
That's fun.
Yeah.
You didn't say I could have a real one.
Well, you didn't ask.
The face of disengagement. The face of disengagement. See, it's actually this simple. Money's not going to drive engagement and motivation. The absence of fairness will drive disengagement and demotivation. Let's share one more video to reinforce this point. There are 2 monkeys, monkey left, monkey right. Monkey on the left-hand side is being rewarded for a behavior. The reward mechanism is the reinforcement of a cucumber slice. Monkey on the right-hand side, he decides to change the reward system. He now rewards the monkey on the right with a grape. Now, if you know monkeys really like grapes. Watch the behavior on the monkey on the left when he senses unfairness. There is the behavior. Here is the reward system, which was a cucumber slice. There is the behavior, I'm changing. Here is a grape. Monkey left. There's the behavior, there's a reward, same crummy cucumber. What I love about those two clips, it demonstrates that children and monkeys don't have the finesse of to hide their disengagement. Your employees do. Your employees are clever. You don't know which of the employees that are disengaged. Worse, which of the employees that might be actively disengaged. Okay, Ralph Lauren, let's talk about performance. Performance is a pillar that you cannot survive without performance. So let's look at Ralph Lauren. Ralph Lauren, in full disclosure, they've been a client. Even though I shop at Kohl's, I wear Ralph Lauren clothes. Well, when you look at their investment page, this is what you see. They are one of the world's most profitable companies. They perform. But when you peel away the onion, you see this interdependency that I talked about that defines Creativeship. This is their investment page. They expand international presence. They innovate. They expand new emerging merchandise categories. They develop the global talent pool. While other organizations were underinvesting during the recession, they were investing, and they were highly profitable. They don't view those items as costs. They view those items as investments. Our challenge, we have organizationally, according to research, we don't create cultures of high performance. In fact, Blessing White claims half of your employees don't believe you are putting them in an environment in which they can excel. And having worked in this industry, I happen to believe they're right. How are we creating a culture of high performance in which our employees can excel? Because apparently our employees are telling us we don't. And what an opportunity lost, the interdependency. We talk about performance and engagement. Companies that are categorized as engaged organizations outperform the best performing companies on the S&P. Innovation. You know, normally when we think of innovation, we think of technology. Television to this television. Who has $700,000? That's how much that TV costs. See, we think of the evolution of technology, television to that, right? And often when I work with companies in the AEC space, this is what I often hear. Well, we're not Google, we're not a technology company, we don't make a product, we've been doing the same thing years and years and years and years, so maybe this whole discussion on innovation doesn't really apply to us. Well, Steve Church, I've done some work with him at Avnet. They've been able to quantify. When they get their employees involved in process improvement, that's innovation, and engagement scores go up. When you ask your employees, what do you think? A day sales outstanding is 67 days. Well, if you ask the same people that created the 67 days, they probably can't figure it out. If you ask a different group of employees, they probably can. So how are you asking people what they think in a way that will challenge how you currently do business? It's not just technology companies. Einstein once said, imagination is more important than knowledge. Let's bring it up to 2014. Thomas Friedman and I spoke at a conference in the summer of 2014. This is what Thomas Friedman said. If you take nothing away from today's talk, take this away. Friedman says, passion quotient and curiosity quotient eats IQ for lunch. Passion and curiosity eats IQ for lunch. He basically is saying the same thing that Einstein said. But he's saying in 2015 it has never been more important because everybody has access to knowledge right now. It's the ability to be creative in your curiosity to find that knowledge. Curiosity and passion eats IQ for lunch. Love it. Now let's talk about our 44-year-olds for a second. They test as non-creative, sorry. In fact, age 44, we are at our least creative selves. Why? Because we are stuck in policies and process, and this is how we do it. You ever wonder why Polaroid had cash? They had a dominant market position, they had a monopoly, and they didn't figure out digital photography was coming along. Why? They were really, really smart people. Why not? And then we have our 5-year-olds, 98% creative. This is one of the test questions. They go up to a 44-year-old and say, act like a lion. Unless it was last night, that table over there. Where are my friends from Canada, in Minnesota? Shout out time, where are you? Have you used those Bose speakers yet? Not yet. Your buddy let us drink his champagne. I want some sharing of those speakers. Well, if you ask a 5-year-old act like a lion, this is what the 5-year-old does. Ah! If you ask an 8-year-old, they won't. Someone will make fun of me. See, we don't innovate because we're afraid people will make fun of us. We're afraid. I work for AECom. I could not get anyone to agree that my blazer was blue. We had 50,000 employees. I would want to do something. This is what I would hear. Well, did you check with Tony in Hong Kong? Did you check with Nigel in Australia? Did you check with Eduardo in Brazil? Guess what? Nothing got done, at least in my area. I had to quit. Suffocating. What an advantage you guys have. You're now 50,000 employees. I believe there are 100,000 today. You're in kayaks. How can you innovate? How do you get people that aren't yet sitting around the table to help you get to where you need to go? Love that picture. Well, see, innovation and age, this is what I think happens. I think our expertise becomes a handicap. You become a know-it-all. I'm the premier structural engineer in the world. Not going to listen to anyone. Tenure. If I had time, I would have challenged what Chuck said at Parsons. Because he said in kind of a bragging sort of way, our folks, after 10 years, no one leaves. I almost raised my hand and said, well, why is that good? After 10 years, no one leaves the Registry of Motor Vehicles. How's that working out? Now, I happen to be a big fan of Parsons, and I love the ESOP. So I would have been teasing him because they are actually extremely creative and innovative, especially for a company of, what, 15,000? Here's an interesting case study. Forbes listed as the #1 most innovative company, Salesforce. Salesforce.com. Mark Benioff heard him speak. We spent billions acquiring 24 firms because we couldn't afford to wait. Salesforce.com is the epitome, in my opinion, of creativeship. Not only are they high performance, creative, but they are philanthropists as part of their DNA. They give away more products, time, money than almost any like company. Embody the concepts of creativeship. Try branding. David, you'll like this. When I was in the inside, I used to always partner with our marketing department because you have to show the world of your clients the same exact picture you're showing the world of your employees. It's co-branding. The types of people that you hire should be the face that you put in front of your clients. Same message. Co-branding. Your employer brand, your product or service brand. A great example, we talk about Whole Foods. Why work here? You saw their mission statement earlier. They hire the types of people that kind of mirror the types of people that shop there. It's not by accident. Well, there's something else going on. The last thing you should be after is, as a goal, client satisfaction. Client satisfaction is so yesterday. Client satisfaction is passive. You don't want client satisfaction. You want client engagement. Client engagement is active. And they all have megahorns. All of them. So how do you get your clients, your employees, and other key stakeholders to be brand ambassadors on your behalf? That's try branding. Some organizations have been doing it for a long time. Apple. I drive an Audi. This is a true story. Got a brand new Audi 2 years ago. I put it on the street in my brand new Audi, and along comes my neighbor, Doug. Doug walks down, looks at the Audi. It's brand new. Doesn't say nice car. Looks at me and says, so, did you drive the Beamer? I said, yeah. How come you didn't buy the Beamer? He said, I actually like the Audi better. Well, and he proceeds to tell me how BMW is far better than my Audi. That's brand ambassadorship. Magic when you see it, because they become brand deliverers. How do you get your employees, how do you get your customers to be brand deliverers on your behalf? They do it. And this is why it's so important. If you are in the hospitality business, you know this to be true. If you have a lousy guest experience, you're going to give me 2 stars or 1 star. I can't survive if you continue to do that. Guess what? Glassdoor.com is not going away. 75% of every single person who accepts a job these days looks at your Glassdoor ranking. If you have disengaged employees or disengaged stakeholders, they're going to be telling the world how terrible you are. I don't think you have a choice. I spoke to someone earlier today. I brought up Glassdoor, and this is what the person said. Oh, just the negative people respond. We don't pay attention to Glassdoor. Then I say, well, does the Southwest Airlines just have negative people? Does Bain & Company just have negative people? Other companies that are at 4 to 4.5 out of 5, where are their negative people? It's not going away. Glassdoor.com is doing to us what Yelp and TripAdvisor and others did to the hospitality industry. Better get on board before it's too late. Your brand accelerator is social media. The good, the bad, ugly. Let's talk about... I had to stick that in there. If there was a millennial in the room, they would say, what is that music? Let's talk about the good. This is pretty cool. I was flying in Asia, and I flew this airline called Cebu Pacific. Here they are. I brought them to you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please direct your attention to the cabin crew who will demonstrate the safety features of this aircraft. Each seat is provided with a seatbelt. To fasten, push it.
Now, you might not know that is Cebu Pacific, but you damn well know it's not Delta. By the way, look, someone filmed that. A passenger filmed that. And it's had almost 11.1 million views. How much would you have to pay? You're a marketing guy. How much would you have to pay to get 11 million views? That's the good of social media, when you can somehow engage your employees in a way that they're engaging their customer base. Now let's look at maybe not so good. There's a great example. Sorry, this thing's hypersensitive. David Carroll, Canadian. Who's from Canada? You probably know this guy. David was flying United Airlines. He looked out the window. He sees they were throwing his guitar. He was an obscure folk singer. They arrive. He files a claim. The guitar is broken. United Airlines said, if you read the small print, we don't reimburse for musical instruments. So David Carroll decided to write a song. The name of the song is United Breaks Guitars. Here it is.
I flew United Airlines on my way to Nebraska. The plane departed Halifax, connecting in Chicago's O'Hare. While on the ground, a passenger said from the seat behind me, my God, they're throwing guitars out there. The band.
I love that. I could watch that all day long. Okay, so let's fast forward. 15.4 million views. Guess what? United called him and said, Mr. Carroll, there was a misunderstanding. Of course, we'll pay for your guitar. United Airlines now uses this in their customer service training. As for David Carroll, he's been on Jimmy Kimmel Live. He has like 3 books. He's in the midst of his 15 minutes of fame. Now, it actually gets worse. So the good, the bad, and the ugly. Anyone here from Australia? Okay, Matt Corby having a Subway sandwich in Australia. He looks at the sub, it looks kind of skimpy. He takes out a tape measure, measures it. Subway, please respond. He puts it on Subway's Facebook page. Lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. So, if I were you thinking about social media, it does not help you if you have a disengaged workforce. It is not going to help you if you have an unhappy customer population. Never before in the history of mankind can one dissatisfied employee or customer exponentially hurt you or help you as much as they can today. And lastly, globalization, global growth. Each one of these white dots represents 1 million people. Let's take a look at what's happening in the world. And we're going to start going back to 1729. Here we go. Look at India, look at China. Why in a million years would you want to be thinking domestic and domestic only? In fact, 91% of all registered companies are outside the US. 95% of the world's population live outside the US. Technology has made the world very small. My little YouTube video, I've traveled all across the globe. How do they hear about me? YouTube video. Cost of sales, 1 internship, $3,000 one summer. Now, it's not just market penetration. This is what you're probably thinking. You're probably thinking it's very expensive to do international work. You have no choice. Why? Because you're trying to hire people. Let me explain. They're coming and they're global. 2015, we are here. The largest population working side by side right now are the millennials. Who has a child who's a millennial? Who has a child who has been through college? Who has a child who's been through college who's done some study abroad? If you asked that question 20 years ago, not one hand would go up. Let's share some statistics. 50% of graduates, Notre Dame, studied abroad. 81% of University of San Diego studied abroad. Why leave San Diego? 81% are. USA Today 2014 study, 4 out of 5 freshmen have aspirations to study abroad. If you want to win the war for talent, and this was something that we at AECOM did remarkably well. If I can interview you as a new grad and talk about global opportunities. And you're interviewing with him in Minnesota, talking about opportunities in Minnesota. He's been playing video games with kids from China and India since he was probably 10. They are global. It's not going away. If you want to win the war for talent, somehow I believe every organization has to figure out this global workforce. It's not about market penetration, it's about where the talent is going to be. And again, why care? Well, 2011 was not long ago. 2011, people like me, we were in charge, 59.1 million of us, by pure volume, if nothing else. Look at 2015, where we are today. 2015, we are now seeing Gen X, the dominant population, working side by side, Gen Y. And by the way, Gen X for a second, who's Gen X? 30s? Can you raise your hand? Steve, mind if I give you a hug? A little bit. Hug Gen X. Deloitte claims 62% of Gen X are looking for a new job right now. They got beaten in the recession. More than any other generation, they lost. They're also sick of hearing about the millennials. They're also sick of people like me who kind of refuse to get out of the way. Hug your Gen X, you're going to need them, because they're actually small in numbers. Think hourglass. Very small in the middle, boomers above, many of them, delaying retirement. Big population of millennials. Hug Gen X, you're going to need them. So, Creativeship, that's a mouthful. It's the interdependency of each one of these business pillars. I believe the A&E industry, don't get mad at me, I've been in your industry for 25 years. You're not early adopters of new practices compared to other clients and other industries that I work with. I think the organizations that embrace some of these concepts first in this industry will win. Those who don't, I believe, may not win. So with that, you can reach me, Bob Kelleher, Twitter handle, employeeengagement.com. I'm always honored to be amongst my friends. I was joking with David earlier. I said, David, I work with all industries, but I feel so comfortable coming back to my roots. Thanks for having me, guys.